Soma's arrival. Some years after Sita's arrival, the Maharani gave birth to a daughter named Urmila. Sita and Urmila had two girl cousins who also lived with them, and so the house became very busy with children. When Sita was around 12, a young servant girl named Soma, only a few years older than Sita, showed up at the palace. The Maharaja took her in without much questioning, and she became Sita's personal attendant. Almost immediately, she began calling her Rani Mata, as did the rest of us. Soma was an attractive girl with a round face and broad smile. She was about the same height of Mata, but not nearly as slender. Although she was pretty, her appearance was very modest, as she did nothing to enhance herself. She kept her hair tied up all the times, covered by a cloth, as if to keep it out of the way so she could engage in any kind of work. And as I was to discover, no work was too humble for Soma. There was something very special about Soma, a quality of humility and service, a maturity and wisdom far beyond her years, and a quiet dignity that reminded me much of my father. When I was young, I thought my father the ideal servant who never had a thought of himself, whose every action was for the benefit of the one he served. Soma displayed the same qualities. No task was too menial for her, and she was always the first to perform the task that needed to be done. Beyond that, she seemed to know Mata's wishes and thoughts before they were even expressed. If Mata had a desire for a sweet, Soma had already prepared it. If Mata wanted to collect flowers or fruits for a puja, Soma had ready exactly what Mata needed. Mata took this in due course and never seemed surprised by Soma's near perfect attunement with her wishes. I became very fond of her and found myself seeking her counsel on many matters, although she was young enough to be my child. I began to think of Soma almost as an extension of Mata herself. It was around that time when Soma came that Mata approached me as we were sitting outside gathering flowers for the evening puja. She suddenly made a motion as if to remove something covering me. What is it, Mata? I asked, thinking she was trying to brush some insect away from my shoulders. Suddenly, she drew back with a look of surprise on her face. I cannot remove it. Remove what? I asked. Are insects fluttering around me? I looked at my shoulders and over my back but could see nothing. She shook her head. No, Meenakshi. I see a cloud around you, but I can't remove it. I'm so sorry. A cloud? I don't see any cloud, Mata. Never mind, she replied in a soothing voice. I will speak with Pitaji about it. In my room that night, I pondered over the incident. What had Mata seen that disturbed her? I had come to understand that she had special abilities and could see and know things that none of us could see or know. It was as if she could read our minds and hearts, but she was ever so modest about displaying what she knew. Perhaps she saw the misfortune that had come over my family, and that still weighed down my heart, despite the joy of Mata's presence. Soma had been within hearing distance of our conversation, and the next day approached me. Meenakshi, you must trust Mata. If she saw something amiss, do not worry. She will take care of it. I nodded. That is also what I felt, I replied with a faint smile. Many of us have received healings from her, and I trust she will take care of it. My voice trailed off. I had grown so close to Soma, and at that moment I thought to share with her my family secret that we had been subjected to great misfortune some generations back, but I could not even find the words to utter. In fact, I did not myself understand it because my father never spoke of the past. So what could I say? I stopped myself as the thought entered my mind that this family matter must stay buried deep in my heart. Mata's beauty was such now that whenever she went out, people could not help but gaze at her in wonderment. Mata seemed not to notice, but this did not make Janak Baba happy. I overheard him say to Sunainama on several occasions that he wanted the people of Mithila to see her inner beauty, not her outer appearance. The people of Mithila may have treasured her physical perfection, but we in the household saw and loved most the generosity of her heart. If anyone who was suffering crossed her path, or if she heard of a misfortune falling to any family in Mithila, she would be the first to offer aid as if her nearest and dearest had been struck down. Janak Baba saw this and did not discourage it, but what he most appreciated was her mind. Mata had learned from sage Gargi the art of spiritual debate, and Janak Baba loved to engage her. Initially, he would always win the debate, challenging her with a profound question that she struggled to answer. But this did not last long, and soon she was responding with great insight, or so we, the servants, were told, and Janak Baba would assume a look of satisfaction and appreciation. Then there came the day when she won the debate, posing difficult philosophical questions that he could not answer. We in the kitchen were stunned when we were told that Janak Baba had yielded to his young daughter, saying he had not yet experienced the state of which she spoke. You are now my teacher, he said to her. Never say that, Pitaji, she replied, placing her fingers over his lips. I am just your daughter, always your daughter. He smiled and responded, Sita, your mind is like a multifaceted jewel, more insightful than most minds I have encountered. You must always use it to serve the world. There is no other purpose. Never let pride enter. That is the downfall of so many, even of the great teachers. A beautiful form, a brilliant mind, and a most tender heart. Yet Mata seemed oblivious or uncaring of her qualities. Her dress was simple, her speech was humble, her love was for the freedom of the forest, to wander at will, to observe the bountiful manifestations of nature, and to love and enjoy them all. A few years after Soma's arrival, Mata began to spend more and more time alone, wandering off into the forest while we were all engaged in other activities. When it would come to our attention that she was nowhere to be found, I would get anxious. Soma always reassured me and would go herself into the forest to find her. On one such occasion, Sunainama had been looking for Sita, but she was nowhere to be found. She approached me to inquire about Sita, but I only shook my head. I have not seen her since last evening, I replied. Looking uneasy, she murmured, Urmila also has not seen her, and she did not show up for the morning meal. She has been gone a long time. Then Sunainama inquired of Soma, who responded as I did, but then added, I think I know where to find her. I glanced at Soma, knowing what she meant. When Sita wanted to walk in the forest to experience its beauty and to be with animals, she would not go alone. She would always invite her sister or her cousins and one of the servants. But when she wanted to commune with the deities in meditation, she would often slip away before any of us noticed. I believe she left for the forest alone very early this morning, she replied quietly. I will try to bring her back. Please, Soma, go quickly and ask her to return to the palace, requested Sunanama. A number of sages are coming tonight, including Sage Gargi. I know, and I know Sita will want to serve them their evening meal and sit with them this evening. She must get ready. The sun had passed the midway point in the sky, and there were not many hours left of daylight. The sages would soon arrive, and Sita always insisted on serving them herself. Soma left, and I waited anxiously. Not long after this conversation, Sunainama sought me out and asked if Soma and Sita had arrived. I shook my head. What could have happened? She mused. I could see that she was concerned and so hurried to assure her. I will go and see what has kept them, perhaps an animal in need. Sunainama nodded her head. We all knew of Sita's care for the animals. If there had been an injury or an attack on an animal, Sita would attend to it and not leave until she had done what she could. Yes, go, Meenakshi, and tell them to hurry back. It had been some years since I had frequented the forest, as it was usually Soma who now accompanied Mata on her walks. So I cautiously entered the thicket of trees and followed the narrow path. I called out to them, at first in a quiet voice and then more forcefully, Soma, Mata. There was no answer. I continued to call out as I entered more deeply into the groves. Finally, I saw the figure of Soma approaching. She was alone. Where is Mata? I asked in alarm. Sunainama has sent me to find you both. The smile that always adorned Soma's face was gone. In its place was an expression of concern. Her face was pale and her voice vibrated with a slight quiver as she replied, She is deep in meditation, I think. She has entered a very high state, and I cannot bring her back. She has not moved since I arrived and sits there still as a rock. Hurry back and ask Janak Baba to come and bring water and some fruits for when she returns to waking consciousness. Without a word, I turned around and ran as fast as I could over the rock strewn path, making my way through bramble and heavily wooded growth. As I neared the edge of the forest, something caught my clothing, and before I could prevent it, I fell to the ground and twisted my ankle. Tears filled my eyes. I could not stop now. I had to go get to Maharaja. Mata, give me the strength to carry on. I prayed as I forced myself to my feet and with much difficulty made my way into the palace. There I encountered Kiran leaving the kitchen area. What happened, Meenakshi? He asked in a concerned voice. Why are you limping? Are you hurt? I shook my head. I must find Janak Baba. Do you know where he is? In the stateroom with his guests. They have all arrived. They are ready for the evening meal. But everyone is waiting for Mata. He paused and then glanced down at my leg. But what is wrong with your foot? You are limping. I can get one of the servants to go to the Janak Baba if you need him. No, no, I hurried to reply. I'm fine, really, but I must go. Taking my leave, I did my best to wobble to the stateroom. I heard their voices as I approached, but as I reached the doorway, I stopped. Never before had I entered that room without being called there. It would be presumptuous of me to enter. But Janak Baba was needed. What was I to do? I retreated a few steps, undecided, when I heard him call for me to enter. I tried to steady my steps as I entered the room and pranamed to Janak Baba and the gathered sages. What happened to you, Meenakshi? Why are you limping? He asked. It is nothing, I replied in barely more than a whisper. Soma has sent me to request your presence. She is with Rajkumari Sita in the forest and says it is urgent that you come. Is anything wrong? He asked in a voice of concern. I don't know. She says it's urgent. Janak Baba closed his eyes and stayed this way for several minutes. Then, opening his eyes, he murmured, It is what I thought. I have been long afraid of the day when she would remember where she came from. As Janak Baba excused himself from the assembled sages, Sage Gargi asked if she could accompany him. He nodded, and calling for Usha, he instructed her to take care of serving the evening meal. Then Janak Baba asked four gods to fire the torches to light the way as darkness had already set in. As best as I could, I wobbled off to gather a few fruits in a basket and fill a small jug of water. My ankle was now throbbing. With great pain, I led him to where I had met Soma. She was not there, but when I called out to her, she emerged and guided us to where Sita was seated in the immobile position. locked like a lotus flower in an utterly still pond, showing not the slightest flutter of life. I had never seen her like this, and my heart pounded at the thought that she may have left us. A cry escaped from my lips, but Soma put her hand on my arm to still me. There is no breath in her, murmured Soma to Janak Baba. I arrived just after midday, but she had been missing since early morning, and I suspect has been like this since then. Soma and I retreated a short distance as Janak Baba uttered a mantra and entered meditation. Sage Gargi began to chant Vedic hymns. Several hours passed with him in silent meditation and Sage Gargi chanting. Finally, Janak Baba rose and asked me to bring all the sages. I cannot bring her back. Perhaps collectively we can entreat her to return, he said solemnly. As Soma saw my condition, she asked me to stay put. She took two of the gods to light the way and returned to the palace. The sages knew nothing of what had transpired and thought it very strange that the Maharaja had disappeared so suddenly with no explanation and had still not returned. It was getting late and they were eager to retire. They were not pleased with the situation, but when Soma arrived and explained in a sorrowful voice that due to Sita's condition, that Maharaja was requesting them to come to the forest and hold their discussions there in her presence, they all nodded, saying they were eager to be of assistance. Soma added, the Maharaja is hoping that your presence will help bring our beloved Rani back to us. She led them into the forest where Janak Baba and Sage Kagi were meditating by Sita's side. Some of the servants accompanied them, bringing cushions and torches. The six sages made a semicircle around Sita and began chanting Vedic invocation. They meditated, then discussed their perceptions, followed by more meditation and more discussion. At one point, Janak Baba stopped participating and entered what appeared to be the same state as Sita. He sat there still as rock, without any movement and seemingly without any breath. And so the night passed. Leaning against a tree, I drifted into a semi sleep state. But as the night wore on, the pain in my foot increased until I could no longer find a comfortable position. Soma saw me squirming and realized that I had hurt myself quite badly. Searching for something to wrap around my foot, she finally tore a part of her shawl and, despite my protestations, bandaged my leg. This eased the pain enough for me to drift off into a shallow sleep. At the first rays of dawn, the chanting began again, mingling with the chatter of the assembly of birds. Together they made a most beautiful symphony of sounds. My eyes opened to an almost unearthly scene. The greenery of the forest glittered ever so gently in the early rays of dawn. A soft hue had settled over the forest floor. Many small animals had come close to us in the night to observe this most unusual gathering. It appeared as if we had all awakened to another world, more beautiful than even our earth, if that was possible. I glanced at Sita, hoping that she had returned to the world, but she remained locked in the meditation pose. And Janak Baba was still deep in meditation. The chanting went on for some time, and when it ceased, the sages began discussing the nature of what they had experienced the night before. One of the sages remarked that he had entered a state he had never before experienced. Another concurred. It was then that I saw Janak Baba slowly open his eyes. A look of extreme joy painted across his face. He listened quietly as the sages continued to comment on the nature of their experiences. Suddenly, I saw a movement. Mata had shifted her position ever so slightly. Everyone seemed to catch this subtle movement of her hands, and the sages fell silent, with all eyes turned to her. She didn't stir again for some time, but finally her eyes cracked open. The first one she saw was Janak Baba, and she smiled, opening her eyes wider, her face exuding such love. Pitaji, she whispered, you're here? He also hadn't spoke before this moment, but he nodded and said very slowly, we are all here, Sita. You could not come to us, and so we came to you to share in your ecstasy. Sita looked around and seemed surprised to see us all gathered, not quite grasping what had happened. And so Janak Baba continued, you came here early yesterday morning and went into deep meditation. Soma could not bring you back, nor could I. So I brought the sages who had come yesterday to this spot where are. For some time, everyone sat in silence as if still enjoying their inner experience, and then Mata noticed the basket of fruits and the pitcher of water before her. Asking the sages to excuse her for not serving them the evening meal last night, she slowly rose and gave each one a piece of fruit and some water. Then Janak Baba asked the gods to guide everyone back to the palace for the morning meal. I will join you shortly, he said. As I rose to leave, I quickly winced in pain. Mata noticed this and asked me to stay behind with Soma, saying that she would apply some medicine. When the others had left, he asked very gently, where had you gone, my daughter? I could not find you anywhere in the ethers. She replied simply, to him. To whom? He asked. To the one I will marry. It was he who brought me back. When he uttered the words, soon we will be reunited, this body came alive again. Had he not returned, had he not arrived, I would have merged into the great ocean of being. I'll be ever grateful to him for bringing you back to this world, he replied with deep emotion. I was afraid you would disappear into the absolute and my Sita would be with us no more. I'm not yet prepared for that. Sita smiled. You know, I would not leave without first taking your permission. You, who have called me to this world, will be the one to release me. This was the promise Sita made to her father that day in the forest. Janak Baba smiled. Let us go have some food with our guests. You go ahead, Pitaji. I must first attend to Meenakshi's wounded ankle. As he rose to leave, she added with a knowing smile, I see you also dove into a blissful sea. He pranamed and replied very solemnly, no sage has been able to transmit the experience that I received in your presence last night. If you were not my daughter, I would. Pitaji, say no more, she replied, gazing lovingly at him. What came to you last night was the result of your many years of effort. Janak Baba seemed reluctant to leave her, but Mata laughed and said, don't worry, Pitaji. I have given you my word. I will not disappear from here. I will go see to our guests then. But do not stay long. Your mother, I know, is eager to see you. Once he was gone, Mata directed Soma down a nearby path and described in detail the plant that she would find. Then she reached over to unwrap the bandage that Soma had improvised. I instinctively tried to withdraw my leg, but Mata would not let go of it. Please, Mata, it is nothing, really. I just need to rest a bit longer. You have been resting all night, and look at the swelling. The medicine will help. My ankle was now twice its normal size, and the throbbing was just relentless. It was difficult to keep the tears from welling up. I'm your servant, Mata, please, I murmured quietly, trying again to withdraw my leg. Holding on to my leg, she touched the swollen ankle very gently and said, and I am the servant of the world, Meenakshi. How can I not take care of your wound when I have the means? I am so sorry for this mishap, Mata. I don't want to trouble you in any way. Sorry, for what, Meenakshi? It is not your fault that you tripped. It is my misfortune, Mata, to have tripped, the misfortune that has followed me from birth. Misfortune? She paused and looked at me thoughtfully and then said, Ah, yes, the curse. It is true, but you should not succumb to that, Meenakshi. Curse? Mata? I looked at her questioningly, confused by her words. She didn't respond right away, but then she murmured, Your father never told you. Perhaps he thought it better. I didn't know what she was referring to, and so kept quiet. She looked away as if debating whether to say more. After several minutes, she turned her eyes to me, those eyes that always radiated such kindness and care. Your father's death was due to the curse cast upon your family generations ago. It had nothing to do with you. I gazed at her, confused by her reference to something I knew nothing about. I was startled by her words, but tried not to show the emotions that churned within me. She continued, 5 generations ago, a great sage cursed your ancestor, and that curse was to extend for 5 generations. You are the last to be affected by this. Your father did everything in his power to try to lift the curse from you, but even Pitaji could not negate what was done. When a great sage utters a curse, it cannot be reversed. The power of the words vibrates in the ethers and brings about the intended effect. A curse, Mata? I muttered in disbelief as if I had not understood her properly. She nodded. For 5 generations, I asked. Again she nodded. But why? My voice began to tremble. What could my ancestor have done to bring this upon his descendants? She didn't answer right away, but finally said, A misdeed with a young woman whose family was under the protection of the sage. To misbehave in such a way is a very grave infraction. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That is when your family lost their standing in society, their land, everything. They were shunned, but the Janak family took in the son of one who was cursed, your great grandfather, as a servant. He had a very hard life, and your grandfather as well. The curse weakened with your father, but it left him with great sadness, and of course, the misfortune of losing your brother and mother. Brother? I asked again in disbelief. I had no notion of a brother. I know none of this. You had an elder brother who drowned in the river soon after you were born. He was about 4 when one day your mother took him along when she went to the river to bath. He fell into the rushing water and was swept away. Overcome with grief, your mother could not forgive herself, and one day the river took her as well. I thought my mother died of natural causes soon after I was born, I murmured. My father never told me about a brother, but that must have been why he never allowed me to go to the river. That is why he never spoke to me about my mother. I never understood him, why he was so austere. I thought it was a lack of love, but it was the sadness of losing his family. Mata nodded. Your father tried in every way to have the curse lifted from you. When he lay dying, Pitaji went to see him. As he blessed him, Pitaji said he would fulfill any dying wish. Your father asked that you be cared for, that the Janak family always look after you, and that Pitaji do what he could to ease the curse. Pitaji made him that promise. This explains why my father forbade me to marry. He always said it would bring nothing but sorrow to me. That was his misunderstanding, Meenakshi. Your children would have been free of the curse. You are the last to feel its effect. And that is why Janak Baba came to the river that day, I murmured, as I recalled the image of Janak Baba standing by the river as I struggled in the water, commanding the waves to lift me onto the shore. Mata nodded. Pitaji told me that story. He said it was your time to die. The river was about to take you as it had taken your brother and mother. But he could not let that be. He had given his word to your father to protect you, and his word was able to counteract the decreasing power of the curse. Mata fell silent and then began again. Do you remember when I was much younger, we were sitting in the garden and I saw a cloud surrounding you? I tried to lift it but could not. I nodded, recalling that day when she spoke words that I could not understand. When I spoke to Pitaji about this, he explained about the curse that was put upon your family. But he said you were mostly freed of it. The only reminder was a sadness from your father's early death. He managed he had managed to weaken its effect on you. But how unjust, Mata, that my father and I should be punished for a misdeed of an ancestor we never knew, however serious that misdeed may be. You are right, Meenakshi. That is exactly what I said to Pitaji when he told me this story. I asked him if it would not be better for the society to sit in judgment than to have a sage have such power to control a person's fate. He explained that society was not yet ready to assume this responsibility, but that one day it would be so. In earlier times, the laws were kept through the words of the sages, but too many now are filled with their own power and are exceeding the boundaries. Mata's eyes assumed a firmness as she gazed off into the distance, as if setting in motion the determination for another way to administer justice. Then, as if speaking to herself, she mused, I had heard of too many injustices committed by the sages through their curses. Though wise they may be, they also have emotions, preferences, likes, and dislikes. Few have risen above that, and only when they are beyond their personal feelings can they truly administer justice. I long to meet such a person. Pitaji is the closest I have found. I was too shocked to take in fully the meaning of Mata's words. When I turned my head, I saw Soma standing nearby with a basket of medicinal plants, and my mind turned to my aching ankle. I again became aware of the pain. Mata saw this and took the plants from Soma. She pounded the plants with a stone, squeezing out every bit of oil, and then she had Soma apply the oil to my aching ankle. Now you must stay off of your feet. If you apply this ointment every few hours, in a few days you will be much better. Then turning to Soma, she asked her to go back to the palace and see if she could find Kiran. Ask him to come quickly, she said. Then turning to me, she said, do not resist, Meenakshi. Kiran can help you back to the palace. But Mata, see, I can stand. I tried to raise myself but fell back. My foot was unable to bear any weight. Will you disobey me? She asked in surprise. I shook my head. Then you must stay off your feet, at least for today. Before long, Soma arrived with Kiran. When he saw my state, a look of alarm crossed his face. She will be fine, Kiran. Do not worry, but you must carry her back to her room. She is not to put any weight on her foot until tomorrow at the earliest. And, Soma, you must continue to rub the ointment to her ankle throughout the rest of the day. I drew back as Kiran tried to lift me. Never had I been touched by a man other than my father, and I resisted. I gazed in shock at Mata, who whispered to me, it's only Kiran. That is why I called him. He's well known to you, like a brother. Do not resist. By tomorrow you will be much better. As we were leaving, Mata sat down again in the spot where she had meditated through the day and night. Mata, Soma protested. Aren't you coming? You have not eaten since yesterday morning. Mahata smiled. Do not worry, Soma. I will not disappear again, but I need a few minutes here alone before I return. I won't be long. Her face grew serious. Soma still hesitated to leave her, but Mata nodded, indicating that we should leave. I will soon follow, she said. We could not but obey, and so reluctantly we returned to the palace without her. True to her word, Mata appeared shortly in the palace. Something had shifted in her. we could see, but I could not pay much attention as I was so distracted by what she had revealed to me. Soma saw me to my room, where I sat alone reviewing my childhood, the many incidents that now were made clear, remarks by my father that now made sense. It was painful to realize that I was the descendant of a cursed man, a man who had committed a most egregious deed. And I realized how few Maharajas would have taken in a cursed family had it not been for the generosity of the Janak family. What would have happened to us? A few hours later, Soma came to apply the medicine and found me in a sorry state. Tears had overtaken me, and I could not hide my red, swollen eyes and disheveled appearance. Meenakshi, she exclaimed, are you still in pain? I shook my head. I didn't know how much of my conversation with Mata she had overheard, so didn't know how to explain my condition. The more I had reflected on Mata's words, the more the import of her words had hit me. My family had been under a curse. My ancestor had committed a great misdeed for which my grandfather, my father, and I had to pay. Minakshi, she asked gently, is it because of what Mata told you? I nodded. Did you overhear? Yes, I heard some of it. Surely you know that everything Mata does is for a reason. If she had told you this, there is a greater purpose. Perhaps it is to understand that this curse can be viewed as your greatest blessing. If your ancestor had not been cursed, your family would not have been taken in by the Janak family, and then you would not have come under the protection of Janak Baba. If your father had not lived with this curse, he would not have asked Janak Baba to look after you, and most likely you would not be serving Mata. Is there any great blessing than to serve her? I shook my head and wiped my tears. You are right, Soma. Since childhood, I have been told about some misfortune that visited my family. Now I understand. Mata did right to explain this to me. I don't fault my father for keeping this secret, as he was a proud man, and it would have insulted his dignity to reveal this to me. And you are so right. I cannot complain about the turn my life has taken. There is no greater blessing than to serve in this household, and to serve Mata is the greatest gift anybody could want. We were both quiet. Then I said, so much has happened today that I don't understand. Yes, that is true. Mata has entered a new chapter, and we will be the witness to that. But it is a wonderful development. Do you not see the light that emanates from her now? Her whole being vibrates, radiates. I laughed. Soma, you see what others can't see. Now it was Soma's turn to laugh. Meenakshi, do not tell me that you have not noticed the abundance that accompanies Mata. Have you not observed how the flowers multiply along the path that she takes, and how the fruits on the trees increase in her presence? This is part of the mystery of Mata. I shook my head. Only you have eyes to see this, but I trust your vision. It is through you that I know something of what Mata is. Meenakshi, she is Prakriti, nature herself in human body. It is who she is. Where she is, nature flourishes. When her energy is withdrawn, nature diminishes. This will become more apparent now. I smiled. Among us all, only you understood her, Soma. I cannot, but I can serve her and love her, and I am content with that. Mata did indeed seem to take on a new air after that night in the forest, one that is hard to describe, as if a new maturity flourished in her. Some weeks later, I was in the room of Sunaina Ma, putting away her personal items when Janak Baba entered. I waited for a sign that I should leave, but none came, and so I carried on with my work. For some time, Sunaina Ma had been assisting Janak Baba with his governing responsibilities, and she had been passing on this knowledge to Mata with much success. One never knew when Janak Baba would retreat to the forest for an extended time, and in his absence, someone had to carry out the affairs of the kingdom according to his wishes. Sunainama recognized Mata's intuitive wisdom and often sought her advice. Mata took an interest in everything pertaining to the kingdom and participated in much of the decision making, offering her innovative and creative ideas. On this day, however, Janak Baba sought to prepare Sunainama for Mata's approaching departure. We must begin to think of organizing a Swayamvara, practice in an ancient India of choosing a husband from a list of suitors by a girl of marriageable age. We must begin to think of organizing a Swayamvara as Sita is approaching marriageable age, said Janak Baba slowly, knowing he would meet resistance. Sunainamma gave him a look of disapproval. Why the hurry? She asked. Her training is now complete. I feel she is ready. But I am not, protested Sunainamma. Will you ever be? You are just setting up the village councils. Let her be part of that and learn. Then we can consider it, she pleaded. You have a good point, conceded Janak Baba. We will move quickly to set up the village councils, but you and I must prepare ourselves because I feel the time for her departure is approaching. As Janak Baba was retreating more and more from governing, he had the idea to set up local councils in each village so that the villagers could take care of many local matters by themselves. It was a novel notion, which at first had been met with disapproval from the ministers, but Janak Baba was insistent. I heard him say repeatedly that people must learn to govern themselves. But they are not ready, was a frequent response. Then we must help them to be ready. It is the way of the future. People must learn to administer the affairs of their community. Even the hermitages were not pleased with the idea. At one gathering of heads of the hermitages, the discussion turned to this matter. During a heated moment, Janak Baba turned to Sita and asked her opinion. Soma and I were standing by the doorway, waiting to bring in the evening meal. Sita was quiet and thoughtful. Then she said, until now, justice has often been administered through the sages, through their blessings and curses. That cannot continue, she said with a touch of sadness in her voice. Too many innocents have been affected. Surely we can find another way. These councils can help administer justice. Sita realized that this would diminish the power of the sages. Their curses kept people in fear of them, and so she added, fear is not the way to justice. I think a fairer way is to let the people decide the best means of dealing with a misdeed, and let those who have misstepped have a chance to redress their wrongs. That is most important. A curse cannot be undone, but a punishment can be reversed if someone shows true remorse and an earnest desire to correct oneself. Rarely did any of the sages object to anything Sita said, but on this occasion they rose in protest, with only a few exceptions. Janak Baba intervened and spoke sternly to them. I agree fully with Sita, but perhaps society is not yet ready for this. Let us begin by trying to organize these councils, giving each village some limited responsibility for its local affairs. This will be a beginning. He assured the ministers and heads of the hermitages that their authority would not be weakened by this new arrangement. The ministers would have to oversee the new councils, and the hermitages would still set the moral tone for the society. At least for the moment, the power of the curse would remain in place.